This city never sleeps. It just waits. I signed the lease this morning, a shoebox apartment in a forgotten corner, shadows clinging to every wall. The landlord handed me the keys with a rat smile and vanished. Inside, the air was thick, heavy with secrets. Neon from the bar across the street painted the gloom in red and blue. Every instinct screamed to leave, but the past was right outside the door. This was my only option. Something was wrong here. I could feel it, a cold knot of dread. This place held a secret, and I was about to find it. It started in the kitchen, a sweet metallic stench that clung to everything. I searched under the sink, behind the stove, nothing but rust and cobwebs. Bleach scrubbing open windows, nothing worked. The smell always returned, stronger. It was everywhere and nowhere, a phantom warning. The apartment watched me, shadows deepening, whispers in the walls. The smell was more than rot, it was a message. I knew the source was close, and I was getting warmer. The smell grew, seeping into every room, every breath. Cleaning was pointless. The rot was alive, mocking my efforts. I tore up floorboards, tapped on walls, nothing but damp and silence. The stench was thickest near the refrigerator, its hum a warning growl. The landlord brushed me off. He knew, and he didn't care. I was alone. The hunt was no longer about cleaning, it was about survival. At night, the apartment whispered, pleading desperate sounds from the kitchen. I'd creep toward the noise, but it always stopped when I entered. One night, moonlight revealed a dark stain seeping from under the fridge. I touched it, cold, tacky, metallic, blood. The realization hit, this was no ordinary rot. This was the smell of slaughter. The whispers were echoes of something terrible. I wasn't just in a run-down apartment, I was living in a tomb. The bloodstain under the fridge was the key. Everything revolved around that humming ancient box. The cold spot in front of it was unnatural, arctic, dead. The whispers grew louder, pleading from inside. The freezer door was sealed tight, as if guarding something. I pulled, but it wouldn't budge. That night, the whispers became a single word, help. I knew, with a bone-deep certainty, I was going to have to open it. Tonight, the smell declared war. It was a suffocating blanket pressing in from all sides. The whispers weren't hiding anymore. They cut through the silence, pleading from the fridge. Fear twisted in my gut, but anger rose to meet it. I grabbed my crowbar, knuckles white, and stepped forward. Someone was in there, someone was alive. I had to help. The crowbar felt heavy in my hands, a solid piece of reality in a room that had gone insane. I wedged the hooked end into the crack between the freezer door and the main body of the unit. The rubber seal was frozen solid, brittle as ancient parchment. It cracked and split as I applied pressure. The whispers inside stopped, abruptly. The silence that followed was somehow worse, heavier, filled with a terrible anticipation. The only sound was the groan of the metal as I put my weight against the crowbar, my muscles straining against the unholy seal. The whole refrigerator shuddered, its motor whining in protest. Sweat beaded on my forehead, mingling with the grime and the cold. The door wouldn't give. It was like trying to pry open a bank vault. I repositioned the crowbar, finding a better purchase near the hinge. I pulled again, gritting my teeth, a low grunt escaping my lips. There was a sharp crack, like a bone breaking. A sliver of the enamel casing chipped off and fell to the floor. A puff of impossibly cold air, thick with the concentrated stench of a slaughterhouse, escaped the broken seal. It hit me in the face, a foul, icy breath from the grave. It smelled of frozen blood and something else, something chemical and sharp. I fought back the urge to gag, to run. The voice echoed in my head, "Help me!" I had to get this door open. I braced my foot against the wall and threw my entire body into it. The metal screamed. Another loud crack, and then another. The seal was breaking, piece by piece. The cold pouring from the opening was no longer just chilly, it was a soul-deep, biting cold that felt like it was burning my skin. Frost was already forming around the edges of the widening gap, a delicate, crystalline lace growing over the filth. The whispers hadn't returned, but I could feel them. I could feel the silent, desperate screaming from within. With one final desperate heave, the seal gave way completely. The door popped open with a sickening sucking sound, a gasp of released pressure. It swung open slowly, its own weight pulling it wide on creaking hinges. The internal light, a weak yellow bulb, flickered on, struggling against the profound darkness it was meant to illuminate. The stench that rolled out was a physical wave, a tidal wave of putrefaction and freezer burn that sent me stumbling back a step. It was the smell of hell, flash frozen. For a moment I just stood there, my chest heaving, staring into the abyss I had just unleashed. My eyes adjusted to the dim, flickering light from inside the freezer. What I saw would be burned into my memory forever. It wasn't a freezer full of food, it was a morgue, a butcher shop, bodies, or parts of bodies. They were packed in tight, crammed into every available space. They were wrapped in thick industrial black plastic, the kind contractors use for demolition work. But the wrappings were torn in places, revealing the horror beneath. A human hand, fingers curled into a claw, its skin pale and waxy. A section of a torso, the rib cage, starkly visible. A foot, its toenails painted a cheerful, mocking shade of red. The scene was a masterpiece of depravity, a grotesque puzzle assembled by a madman. The parts were cut with a brutal precision, yet arranged with a chilling artistic flair. A head, its eyes wide with a final frozen scream, was nestled next to a neatly severed leg. Streaks of frozen blood coated everything. A dark crimson web that held the horrifying tableau together. The frost had settled over the scene like a delicate shroud, unable to hide the butchery. It was a silent, frozen testament to unimaginable violence. Every piece told a story of a life ended in terror, their final moments preserved in this icy tomb. The cold was no longer just a temperature, it was an entity. It seeped into my bones, a paralyzing chill that had nothing to do with the air. My mind reeled, trying to process the sheer scale of the carnage. This wasn't one murder, this was a collection, a gallery. The landlord's words echoed in my mind. It'll pass. He knew. He knew this frozen graveyard was sitting in the kitchen of his apartment building. The metallic chemical smell finally made sense. It was the smell of blood and preservative chemicals, a foul cocktail designed to mask the inevitable decay, even in the freezing cold. I stood there, paralyzed by the sight, the crowbar hanging limp in my hand. The city outside, with all its grime and casual cruelty, felt a million miles away. This was a different kind of evil. This was personal, intimate, and deeply, deeply sick. The flickering bulb above the frozen bodies cast dancing shadows, making it seem like the parts were moving, twitching. My gaze drifted from one horrific piece to the next, a silent inventory of the dead. How many? How long had they been here? And who could do something like this? The questions pounded in my head, each one a hammer blow against my sanity. My eyes scanned the frozen chaos, the jumble of black plastic and pale flesh. Then I saw it, a movement. It was small, a slight twitch near the back of the freezer, behind a stack of wrapped limbs. I thought it was a trick of the light, my own mind cracking under the strain. I stared at the spot, holding my breath, my heart a frantic trapped bird in my chest. Nothing. I must have imagined it. I started to look away, to let the full weight of the horror wash over me. But then it happened again, a definite, undeniable flutter. It was an eyelid. I pushed aside a frozen, plastic-wrapped arm, the cold burning my fingers through my sleeve. Beneath it was a face, a woman's face, wedged between a human thigh and the freezer's back wall. Her skin was a deathly blue-white, her lips cracked and purple. Frost clung to her eyelashes and hair, making her look like a macabre ice sculpture. Her eyes were closed, but as I watched, one eyelid trembled and then slowly, agonizingly peeled open. The eyeball beneath was bloodshot, the pupil a tiny black pinprick in a sea of red. It fixed on me. It was a look of pure, unadulterated terror, but it was alive. A sound escaped her lips. It wasn't a word, just a dry, rasping hiss of air passing over frozen vocal cords. It was the whisper I had heard, the one that had cut through the night. I stared back, frozen in place, my mind a blank slate of shock. She was alive. One of them was still alive. Buried in this icy hell, surrounded by the dismembered bodies of the others, this woman was still breathing. Her life was hanging by the thinnest, most fragile thread, a single spark of warmth in an abyss of absolute cold. The sheer impossibility of it was staggering. Her lips moved again, a slow, pained effort. The sound that came out was barely audible, a fragile crackle of sound in the frigid air. It was a single phrase, the same one I'd heard through the door, the same one that had driven me to open this Pandora's box. Help me. Her eye, her one open eye, pleaded with me. It was a silent scream for rescue from a nightmare I couldn't even begin to comprehend. The landlord's smiling face flashed in my mind. A family tradition. The chilling words now held a new, monstrous meaning. I had just stumbled into the middle of it. The whisper, "Help me," shattered my paralysis. Instinct took over. This wasn't just a crime scene anymore, it was a rescue mission. Every second in that icy tomb lessened her chances. I reached in, ignoring the searing cold, and focused on her flicker of life. That was my anchor in this sea of insanity. I worked frantically, my breath pluming in the cold. Inch by inch she came free, alive against all odds. I pulled her from the freezer and laid her on the dirty kitchen floor. Her skin was icy, her veins dark, one eye pleading for help. I draped my jacket over her, desperate to fight the cold. She flinched, a sign of life. Then her lips moved. "He's coming." A key turned in the lock. We both knew who it was. The sound of the key in the lock was like a gunshot in the silent apartment. My blood ran cold. "He's coming!" The woman's warning echoed in the sudden terrifying quiet. I froze, crouched over her on the floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. The front door creaked open, then clicked shut. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, confident. They were the footsteps of a man who owned the place, who felt he had every right to be here. I looked from the woman's terrified, pleading eye to the open freezer, its horrific contents now on full display. There was no hiding this. There was no explaining it away. The game was up. The landlord appeared in the kitchen doorway. He wasn't the greasy, scurrying little man I'd met before. He stood tall, his shoulders back, a placid, almost serene smile on his face. He wore a neat, clean butcher's apron over his clothes, a stark white against the gloom of the apartment. He took in the scene without a flicker of surprise. His eyes went from me to the woman on the floor, to the open, desecrated freezer. He simply nodded, as if he'd been expecting this, as if I'd just unwrapped a gift he'd left for me. His calmness was more terrifying than any scream or threat. It was the calm of a predator who knows its prey is trapped. "Ah," he said, his voice smooth and conversational, like we were discussing the weather. "You found it? I was wondering how long it would take. You're more perceptive than the last tenant." He took a step into the kitchen, his shoes making a soft sound on the linoleum. He looked down at the woman on the floor, his smile widening slightly. "This one's a fighter. They're always more interesting when they fight. Adds a certain spice to the process, don't you think?" He spoke as if he were a wine connoisseur discussing a particularly fine vintage. The casual cruelty of his words made the air feel thick and hard to breathe. I slowly rose to my feet, positioning myself between him and the woman. My mind was racing, calculating angles, options. The crowbar was still on the floor near the freezer, too far. The kitchen was small, cramped, no room to maneuver. "What is this?" I growled, my voice low and tight. The landlord chuckled, a soft, pleasant sound that was utterly at odds with the horror surrounding us. He wiped his hands on his apron, a gesture of pure, unnerving domesticity. "What is this?" he repeated, tilting his head. "Why, it's a family tradition, of course. I thought I mentioned that." A family tradition, he said, savouring the words. His eyes twinkled with dark mirth. My great-grandfather was a butcher, an artist with a blade. The city, he believed, has a hunger. Not just any meat would do, it needs something special. Passed down through generations, now it's my turn. He gestured to the freezer. Care to join the family business? His eyes locked onto mine, waiting. The landlord's words hung in the frigid air, more chilling than the cold seeping from the open freezer. Join the family business. It wasn't a threat, yet his smile was a mask of placid insanity. He saw darkness in me. Maybe he was right. My choice wasn't just about survival. It was about hers. Her one open eye was wide with terror. She knew what he was, what he wanted. His invitation wasn't just for me, it was to help him finish his work, to turn her into just another frozen package in his collection. My mind was a whirlwind of violence and escape. The kitchen was a death trap. He stood between me and the only way out, eyes missing nothing. The woman on the floor sobbed, a sound that cut through my fear. The choice was made. I couldn't leave her. My body coiled, ready to fight or die. The only question was how it would end. I exploded into motion, kicking the rickety table between us. It slammed into his legs, my only opening. I dove for the freezer, grabbing the cold steel crowbar. He lunged for a knife, spinning with practiced menace. The kitchen became an arena. Brute force against precision. I feinted high, then kicked his knee. He stumbled, his guard dropped. I brought the crowbar down, determined to end it. The crowbar connected with a sickening crunch. He screamed, clutching his ruined shoulder, blood soaking through his shirt and apron. The hunter had become the hunted. I advanced, crowbar ready. The fight was over. Silence filled the apartment, broken only by rain and the woman's shallow breaths. I made the call, left without a name. Some places you can leave, but some smells never wash off.